Hey guys, how's it going? Josh here from Thorny Jams. So I was thinking the other day about Spitfire Audio's Evo Grid. If you're not familiar, Spitfire makes this series of virtual instruments based on something called an Evo Grid, which essentially is a sequencer that takes what you play and elaborates on it. So essentially embellishes what you're playing to make interesting textures that can lead to new ideas. So I thought it was a great idea. I loved how it sounded. However, I can't afford it right now. So I was thinking, how could I recreate something like that using tools that I already have? And that led me to think about Logic Pro's MIDI effects, which I'm not sure if I'm alone in this, but I often dismiss a lot of what Logic has just built into it in the box as maybe of lesser quality or not probably not going to be worth a whole lot, but nothing could be farther from the truth. Logic has tons of really great plugins, effects, and virtual instruments just built into it that you might not be aware of. So I certainly wasn't aware of these MIDI effects, and I realized after playing around with some of them that there's a few of them that are really cool and can lead to some really interesting, kind of textures and musical sounds that, you might not have thought of before. So I would love to just dive in and show you a couple of them that stuck out to me as interesting and kind of reminiscent of that Evo Grid concept. Sort of a poor man's Evo Grid, if you will. So let's dive into Logic and I'll show you what I found out. Okay, so as you can see, we're here in Logic and I've loaded up a couple different instruments for us to play around with these MIDI effects. The one in particular that's worth showing is the arpeggiator, which normally when I think arpeggiator, I don't really think that interesting, but what you can do with this arpeggiator is pretty cool. Basically, you want to pick an instrument with like a short attack and a very, kind of more of a staccato feel, not something legato typically for this. And what's cool about this arpeggiator is that there's a ton of presets, and each of those presets has, a unique kind of arpeggiation that it's going to play when you play a chord. And it also kind of scatters the attacks and the releases of the different MIDI notes. So it creates some interesting textures. And then you can further create interest by upping the variation and octave range, which is going to just make it feel more random. So yeah, this is what this sounds like. Yeah, so just a texture, really. I'm just playing one chord, and it's going to create some interesting textures, and it's all going to be locked to the grid. And I think you can kind of build something off of that. So another thing that I think is worth showing here is the way that this responds to the virtual instruments themselves. So pretty straightforward example with the piano, but if you look at the Wurlitzer, what I've gone ahead and done is changed the attack. So I've lightened the attack and changed the envelope slightly and added a little bit of granulation. And I think what that's going to do is just make, it's going to be more suited to the arpeggiator. So let's try that. Yeah, so I think that sounds just a little bit more like a texture and something that could really sit in the background of a piece, and I like that. And then of course you can just create different presets for each of these instruments and kind of see how the different arpeggiations interact with each other. A quick aside here, I wanted to show you one more MIDI effect, which in this case is the modulator. It's the only other one that stuck out to me as something that I would actually use. And you'll see the modulator has all of its own presets. The one that I really liked was drifting modulation, so I'll just show you an example of that. And what's really cool about that is it's actually just taking my modulation wheel and it's just moving it around at random. I thought that was kind of cool because I'm not going to be doing that. And it's just going to affect whatever parameter is mapped to that modulation wheel, which can just create some unique, kind of random, interesting results. So I thought that was one that I might use more frequently. And then I think all of this really starts to get interesting when you start looking at effects. So in the case of this, what I went ahead and did is just add in a stereo delay. And we'll see what that sounds like. A little bit of reverb as well. So now we have, notes moving around in the stereo field and a little bit more of a spaciousness, which I think just, again, kind of just brings out the textural element more of the instrument. And then I did the same thing with like a vocal instrument as well. So let's see what that sounds like. So yeah, I think starting to get pretty interesting to the point where I could actually see myself making music with just that idea alone. And I think I can play around with that for a while before I spring for the Evo Grid. Yeah, and then, you might be thinking, well, this is great, but how can I actually make music with this? Well, I think when it starts to get interesting is where you use these different effects and these different parameters, and then you start layering textures on top of each other. And you could create a bed of texture with some different instruments, and then you could use some kind of legato instrument to create a melody on top of that. So that was just one idea I had. So let's play around with that here. So yeah, and then if we added in something legato. So yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of ways you could go with that, but I think the combined effect of all those different pulses happening at once, definitely brings out kind of that Steve Reich minimalist new music feel, which I really like. And I think can inspire some new ideas and creations from a plugin that many of us probably already have. So yeah, hope you enjoyed that, guys. I hope you can play around with some of those effects, and hopefully it sparks some new ideas and some new creations for you. Play around, let me know how it goes, and we'll see you next week.